Welcome to Dollars, Lifestyle, and Charity, a finance podcast for gamers. Romans and I are both money guys, but we're also gamers, so we wanted to put this pod together to help gamers like us with some of their tough money topics that can sometimes feel as hard as a Souls boss.
We're talking budgeting, saving, paying off debt, and how to not fall for all the traps life throws at you.
Grab a health potion and let's start stacking gold IRL. This is DLC, a finance podcast for gamers. Welcome to Dollars, Lifestyle, and Charity, a finance podcast for gamers. I'm Scruffy, and this is Romans, and we're your hosts. Glad to have you come. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about taxes. So, Romans, why are we talking about taxes right after we just finished filing for taxes a month ago?
I think the number one reason is people want to do tax talks right on April 15, and the actual best time to do it is when you have time to act. So it's May. Every tax potential solution is the door is open right now. When you're asking for tax tips in April, I would say most doors are closed. It's too late to do something. So let's see what we can drum up today to help folks so they can actually do something about it instead of wishing like they do every year.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It really helps when you have some time, like Romans was saying, to actually put steps into practice before you actually go through the filing process. Because if you're, like Roman said, if you're asking for tax tips, even in January of the next year, anything you do is going to impact the next year of taxes and not really going to be able to have much impact for the previous year of taxes. So right now is really a fantastic time to start planning, get intentional, and especially for those of you that are streamers, since you're self-employed, it makes your tax planning much more important, much more complicated. So we're hopefully going to be able to give you some really good advice today on some practical things that you can start doing now to make tax planning a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Before we get into that, what have you been up to since we last talked, Romans? I know you
Uh,
were about to hop on a cruise.
yeah, and that was a crazy cruise. It's only 3 days, but my wife wanted to try what it looks like to have a genie, and I
Okay.
a genie is basically your own cruise director just for your family. So
Oh,
imagine there's a cruise director for the entire boat. You know, they control all activities. Having your own personal one, if you think it, they can make it happen within reason, right?
hmm.
If you want to fly on a
Okay.
plane, there isn't a plane on the boat. But if there was a plane or a helicopter, and you told them I want to ride on a helicopter, they literally make it happen. If there's a show that
Okay.
suddenly imagine you're at the poolside, and there's a show in the theater, and you just felt like going. Not only would they make sure you could go, they would get you a front row seat to it. So I think it's ruined cruises for me for the rest of my life. I don't know if I could do a cruise like a normal human. His name was Dexter of
Hmm.
Royal Caribbean. If he hears this, I'll send it to him. What a guy. He's been doing it 5 years, and what a true professional. And he made everything happen. Literally, he's like legit magic genie. Rub the bottle. He comes out. My son was like, is there ice cream today? I'm like, I don't think there's ice cream every day. He said, can there be? I'm like, I'm sure there can. And then boom, there was 20 scoops of ice cream, a bunch of ice cream cones. We invited a bunch of friends over, and yeah. I don't know how you cruise without a genie anymore. The next one I
Hmm.
go on next year, uh, it's gonna be a tough one. I'm so spoiled. First world problems. What about
Oh,
you,
that's
Scruffy?
awesome.
What have you been up to?
Mostly just kind of been settling into the new house. Work's been going really well, but unpacking is an ordeal. Finally got everything finished, unpacked, and I was able to start Clair Obscure, which was the game that was been on my number one like to-do list. Uh, I already know it's going to take me a lot longer to play this game than I thought because people are like, oh, yeah, it's only like 20, 30 hours. Not if you listen to every single voice line. And the voice acting in the game is fantastic. They got some really great voice actors, very creative moments, little story beats that you don't necessarily have to experience, but really add to the experience. I just made it through the prologue so far, and I already love the game. I already know this is probably going to be my game of the year for 2025. 2025. Oh gosh, I forgot what year we are in.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's a
game of the
game.
year for 2025.
It's a game developed by the French. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, not sure how I feel about that.
yeah. No, uh, there's some great games coming out of India. I think it's no longer a U.S. and Japan only market. China's
Yeah,
been making great games for a while now. So why not the French? And there's a couple games made in India that I'm kind of curious to see if they're the real thing.
yeah.
But yeah, so cool, nice.
Most of my experience from Indian games have been pretty bad. I started playing a really fun one last year. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd.
Mm,
So I started playing like I think it was Zyga was a big mobile game studio out in India. They made a Star Wars game. It was basically what Marvel Rivals was trying what it did what Marvel Rivals actually did successfully. It was basically a Star Wars hero shooter similar to Overwatch. Was fun a little bit, but they made it basically only for mobile phone and Switch. So the audience wasn't really there, and then they didn't actually have any good player support. Um,
mm.
so I think it's still a playable right now. It's called Star Wars Hunters, but it's closing this year after less than a year run.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, definitely. India definitely has a pretty bad tech record when it comes to quality, but man, they pump out some really cool stuff. So
Mm,
everything has to get better. I can't imagine they'll always make bad video games. There's a Souls-like game. I forget the name of it, but if anything, it really shows you how to make a great game that's authentic to your culture. But to your point,
mm,
the gameplay mechanic itself look really rough, but the story and the storytelling is through the roof. They really nailed down. In that game, I think it's the Hindi culture. I think
yeah.
they knocked that part out of the park. But is it an actual game? Remains to be seen. But your
Okay.
French game though, that I agree. It looks like game of the year. You'll get lost in there. You can play probably 50 hours casually, probably 80. The way you want to play it, you might be in there for 80 hours. So
Yeah, which I don't know if I necessarily have the time for that, but it's gonna be a lot of fun, so we'll see.
you got to
We'll
collect
see
all the
what happens.
legs. And if you play the game, you know what I mean when I say you have to collect the legs. But you're probably not there yet. So no, it's
I
coming.
have not gotten there
Yeah,
yet.
it's
I literally have just gotten through the prologue and was like, I have other stuff I need to
yeah.
do, but I want to keep playing.
Well, what a great start. What a great
Yeah,
start. Yeah.
yeah, it's been really good. So, like I said before, we wanted to talk a little bit about taxes and tax planning. I know Romans actually has some experience with this from another life. So, Romans, why don't you start us off with a tax hack or tax planning hack for people out there?
All right. So the disclaimer, since I do have a license in this, is that I'm not your accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not your CPA. Please seek professional assistance. But for those more casually listening, my hack for you is to be the lazy tax planner. And what I mean by that is the IRS is definitely an entity where you have to guess what the right answer is, right? The
Yeah.
IRS knows what the right answer, you have to guess it, but maybe you don't feel like it. So, my hack for you today is to look at your tax return last year, and your real goal is to just pay 100% of what you paid last year. If you do that, no matter what happens this coming April when it's due, if you paid too little or too much, you're okay. If you paid too little, it definitely helps you to avoid any penalties and taxes because the IRS says by April 15, either you pay 90% of what you definitely owe or 100% of what you paid last year. And if you made a lot of money, then the numbers change. It's 110%. But for the sake of this conversation, if you don't know, look at your tax return, look at the line item that actually tells you how much your tax liability is, and that really is your goal for this year to pay that exact amount. If it's 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever number it is, and then you could look at your paychecks. You could probably look at last year's paycheck or look at your paycheck this year if that's the way you get paid through W-2, and you can figure out how much will actually get paid by April. And then you can figure out what your wiggle room is. Do you need to pay a little bit more to get to 100%? Do you need to pay a little less? If you're self employed, which is really the kind of people we're usually talking to in this podcast, you actually have to do your own homework. You more than likely should be stroking the check that goes to the IRS every quarter. So it's a lot easier for you. If your number was 10,000 last year, that means this year you have to send 2,500 every quarter. And so what I'll tell you, instead of trying to figure out how much money did we make this year, did I make more or less this year, just send 100% of last year, and at least your number is done, and then you can true it up later uh, in April once you actually have time to figure it out. So you're not constantly, because some folks, the IRS is very much a pay as you go. The more you make, the more you pay. But if you do 100% last year, cuts that kind of homework out, and then you already know your number, and just execute that way. So you have less stress and less like, did I make like the question I people struggle with is, did I make more or less the same time last year? And that for financial people, that's an easy question. But for most folks that are not financial, that is a really hard question. You literally go to your wallet and you open it up, and that's not really the answer. That's such a bad answer. That's such a bad way to look at it, is by looking at your wallet or looking at your bank
Yeah.
account. That's not really that is a data point, but that is not the best way to know, did you make more money this year last year. So what do you got, Scruffy? What is your tax planning hacker tip?
Yeah, it's more of a tip necessarily than a hack. I feel like that is definitely a hack because I know for some of my friends who are less financially inclined, they don't really want to have to think about taxes. So the fact that they could just pay 100% of what they paid last year and be relatively fine until the IRS comes back and says, "Hey, you paid a little too much. Here's some money back." Or actually, you still owe this, but you don't have to pay a penalty because you already paid us last year. That's going to be really, really attractive. My tip is a little bit more geared towards our main audience is primarily streamers who are self-employed. So my tip is going to be to start saving now. We already talked a little bit about budgeting for taxes, but if you know what roughly paid last year, your goal is going to be to grow it. So what I would say is we talked about budgeting, add taxes as a line item in your budget. Start saving now, especially if you can put that money into a high yield savings account because as self-employed, you're going to have to be paying about 15.3% of what you make as self-employment tax. If you can put that money into a high yield savings account, you're actually going to be making money off the money that you're paying in taxes. And in fact, if you build that up over time, you're going to be able to get to a point where you're going to have a sufficient amount of money piled up that you're going to be able to have a lower like experienced tax burden because that high yield savings account that you're putting that money into is going to be paying you some interest into that account. So you're not going to have to feel the weight of the taxes that you're being paid. So start now. What I personally do for myself, since I'm also self-employed, is I just put away 16% to be safe so that I can slowly build up the balance of that account so that I'm taking advantage of that interest so that that money is starting to work for me for when I pay it. We're going to get into this later because there's a question about it, but paying quarterly or paying annually when you file is a big thing for people who are self-employed. There's a couple things to know about that, but once you're starting to use a high yield savings account, you are actually having your money work for you instead of just having it go to the IRS and having a big balance in your account that's just essentially losing money.
Cool, cool. That's a
Yeah.
follow up from the last episode too. Putting it in the
Hmm.
budget. Look at you. That's a callback.
Yeah.
Nice work.
It's like we're podcasters or something.
Not quite, not quite. When we're smooth as butter, oh yeah, I'll take that. I'll wear that hat. Right now we're just messing around.
Over under 10 episodes until that happens.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of questions, this is actually something that we've talked a lot about with some of the different streamers in the Reach Discord. Especially since we just got past tax time, there were several people that brought up different questions, and I pulled some of the questions that people were asking from the Discord into here so that we could kind of address some of these. If and someone is not part of the Discord and wasn't able to catch some of those answers, so that you have access to some tax planning info that you may not have had before. So the first question that I thought wanted to address and thought would be really good to go over is at what point should I treat streaming like a business for tax purposes? I'll go first real quick. For tax purposes, that's one answer. One thing I would definitely recommend, you should be treating your stream like a business now, especially if you want to grow it. Because if your goal is to become a full-time streamer, treating it as just something on the side you do might work for now, but if your ultimate goal is to become a career streamer, you need to start treating this as a business as soon as possible. And for tax purposes, it's really just once you start making money because the IRS, as soon as you start making money, is going to want their 15.3 self-employment tax. So if you stream now and you're even just getting a couple of subs, you still have a business in the eyes of the government, so you should treat it as such. So that's what kind of what I have to say. Romans, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks wait until they feel like their real business to start. I think the trigger point is definitely the day you pull revenue, but even really the true trigger point is up to 5 years before then. The IRS, if the IRS wanted to push on you, you have 5 years to generate revenue before something you do is declassified from a business to a hobby, which is the worst thing that could happen to someone is if the IRS says you're not really running a business, you're running a hobby, because a hobby has no tax deductions at all. Like, right, if I want to collect stamps just for fun, that's just a hobby. But if I'm starting to generate revenue on this selling, buying and selling stamps, it's actually a business. And if I'm going to conventions for stamp collectors, those are all business trips. So, in the eyes of streaming, I would tell you if you're really intentionally making content, the problem is there's a lot of hobbyists out there that want to call streaming a business, but you're really not taking it serious. You stream maybe once a month at most, and when you stream, it's probably 45 minutes. You're not even doing the minimum 4 hours to really be like to do what real streamers do over the long haul. Or maybe you only stream 2 hours. Maybe you do 2 hours stream once a week. Uh, Maybe the IRS can get fooled by that, but anyone in this industry knows 2 hours a week. I don't know if you're a real streamer. Like I think you're a hobbyist. Maybe in your pursuit of this, there's reasons why you can only do 2 hours a week. Whether it's family ties, your actual work schedule of your day job, maybe you're in school, and so maybe you could, in a way, make it seem like a business if there's more to it. Maybe you're only streaming 2 hours, but you're doing a business plan. You're negotiating like certain ways to build out your space. Maybe you're saving up money to buy equipment. All that equipment could be business investment. It could be a startup, your startup to start up your stream, which is a whole other way. If you deduct those expenses, they're not just right off the rip. There's some type of 5 year schedule or whatnot to really expense that through. But I would say there's a moment where you really think you could do this for a living. It's a cognitive moment. There's a moment where you're like, you know what? This is more than a maybe. This is a definite yes. And really, that's the moment I would make it a business. I would just tell you, you have 5 years to generate revenue, or the IRS
Hmm.
could come back and beat you up a little bit. So, the moment you think this is a real business, you really need to take it serious and do something to create content worthy of other people giving you uh, some form of currency for in exchange for the service you're providing on the internet.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. All right, next question. Do I need to pay taxes on donations or tips? Yes. The short answer is yes. The IRS, in any form of revenue that comes from streaming, whether it be Ko-fi, Patreon, subs, tips, bits, anything that you're going to get, super chats if you're on YouTube, any form of that is going to be considered business revenue. Even if it's someone just buying you something off of Ko-fi, like if it's an item for stream that you have requested on Ko-fi, that can be considered by the IRS as business revenue because it's going to support your stream. So that is definitely something that you need to be aware of and plan for.
Yeah,
Romans, do
and
you have anything to add before?
well, I think there's a little bit of a philosophical conversation here around the word donation. I think there's certain streamers out there like King Ithalian, who I was a big fan of way back in the day, um, before he like sold his brand 3 times, and the dude made it. Like King Ithalian is an actual success story in the streaming space, and so he's coasting these days. So he's totally chilling. But when he was still hungry and an up and comer, he was very much, and he probably still feels the same way today if you asked him. Most streamers are not places you give donations to. Streamers are
Mhm.
not charities, and I agree. I agree with what Githani would say there. I think that whatever money you throw at the screen to a content creator, if anything, it's a tip. Now, there's different vibes. There's some content creators that are actual nonprofits, and maybe they're churches, maybe they're a pastor. So, and maybe they can find a way to make it a donation for religious reasons. But just generally speaking, I think streamers are not receiving donations or receiving tips, and tips of any kind, whether you're a server at a restaurant or Dexter on a Royal Caribbean cruise. Uh, a tip is a taxable transaction, so I definitely think it should get taxed. Um,
As of right now, at least. There is some talk about no tax on tips going through, which could potentially change this space. So that's definitely something that if it happens, Roman and I will definitely be talking about it, how it's going to impact streamers. But as of right now, at this instant, any form of tip is taxable.
Sounds good. We'll
Yeah.
get back to you.
If it changes. That'd be great if it does. I'm somewhat skeptical if that will actually happen, but you never know. All right, next question. Do I need a separate bank for my stream activities? So, what I'll say is a separate bank or a separate account can definitely simplify things a lot. Separating your personal activities from your stream activities, from your business activities, can make things a lot simpler when it comes to be tax time. It can make things a little bit more complicated because you have to navigate around paying yourself a salary, pulling money out of your stream account into your personal account. So it can definitely add some extra steps. But when it comes time to actually do your taxes, report what your earnings, what your expenses were, in a little bit, we'll get into some deductions you can make for your business as a streamer that can make that process a lot more simple. And if you're doing it yourself, not hiring a professional, if you're just hopping on one of these different tax softwares and entering everything yourself, it can make the time commitment a little bit less because you only have to look in one account to see everything. Um, Romans, you have anything to add there?
So I run 5 different entities, and so to keep my own sanity, each one has its own bank account, has its own credit card, and each one has its own real logins and stuff. Like each one is as separate as can be, because when you cross streams, it just gets confusing. And imagine there's an accountant or somebody who has to do the bookkeeping on the other side. If things are mixed, it's really hard to separate later. And so for my sanity, I keep all literally transactions separate. Um, and I try to maintain that it's just easier that way. So your stream side versus your personal side, you yeah, I think you definitely should keep them separate. And there's some great banks out there. Um, we could save that for the next episode, but there's some great banks to help you keep things separate on purpose. You could almost cognitively remember, instead of using the same. You could open up. You could use the same bank and have a separate account at that bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm of the. I like to keep things so separate. I know which banks do what for me. So we'll say I'll say what I mean by that in a future episode. But yes, please separate.
Stay tuned. All right. Next question, and this is a really important one. Do I need to pay quarterly estimated taxes or can you just pay when you file in April? So this is kind of a pretty specific question, again, for our kind of core audience of streamers. The IRS is pretty lenient with this topic up until you cross the $1,000 mark. as soon in what you actually owe for taxes. As soon as you cross that $1,000 mark on the taxes that you can owe, the IRS immediately wants you to start paying quarterly taxes. And if you don't, it doesn't happen every single time, but they are within their rights to then charge you a penalty because you didn't start paying quarterly taxes. So that's definitely not something that I would recommend or doing. But it's something that you, if you don't know, you could be blindsided because if you've been streaming for a couple years and you've been making some money but not a ton, you can be underneath that $1,000 in taxes. But the second you if you like blow up and all of a sudden have a bunch of success, is we've seen kind of streamers. People have been going for a while, and then something happens that blows their stream up, and people get super super popular really quickly. You can go from not having to worry about this to being hit with a pretty serious tax burden from the IRS with a penalty because you weren't paying quarterly taxes. So I would just recommend if you're self-employed, just get into the habit of doing it now. Don't wait until you cross that $1,000 mark because once you start the habit, it just makes it easier because it's something you've been doing. And in fact, if you're budgeting like you should be doing with for the quarterly taxes, it helps. It's very simple because you just have a 3-month fund that every month you put in what your estimated taxes are going to be. And then after the third month, you pay that to the IRS and then you start over again. Um, so this is something that's really, really important. This is something I experienced personally with my business. I went from making very little money to I got a couple big clients and started making some serious money. And I was like, oh, great. I'm only paying this in taxes. Had the money in my account. And then surprise, IRS said, oh, you didn't pay quarterly taxes. Here's a 10% tax penalty that I had to pay on top of what my existing tax bill was. I forget how high the penalty can go, but it's definitely not fun to have to pay that. So just to avoid that, I'd recommend doing it now anyway, even if it's not 100% necessary, just to get into the habit of it, especially if you're serious about being a streamer.
Yeah, and I think that what I wanted to say here is I almost want to give away a secret hack, but I'm thinking, is it worth saying because it doesn't always work, and I feel bad if you hear this from me, try it and fail. But you know what? I'm gonna give it to you anyways. Here we go. Don't if anyone asks, my name is Scruffy right now. Every every 3 years, you can fall on your knees to the IRS and request a waiver of penalties and fines. The IRS
Hmm,
so it's up to you getting the right IRS agent to approve this, but they can
hmm,
waive if you screw this up every 3 years. The trick is after that, you must be clean for 3 years to reset the clock. So you cannot be one of these people who are just bad every year. If you're one of those kinds of people, you need Jesus and I don't know who else, but only Jesus can save you from the IRS. But for those of you who pay good every year and you mess up because you became a streamer, and this is very common. I've come across so many very successful streamers who eventually I get there and I ask, how was your first year? And oh, it's literally, I think it's 100% hit rate. I don't think I've ever spoken to a successful streamer yet who had their taxes in order, ready to pay the IRS come April.
hmm.
They're owing like 5 to 10,000, 13,000, 30,000 in penalties and fines because when you don't pay enough, you don't just pay a late fee. Like when you forget to return a book at the library, you get hit with a late fee. The IRS is way worse than that. They will charge you a late fee, and then they will charge you an interest fee, and then they'll charge you another fee on top, which I forget what it's called. So they'll triple hit you, and they'll sometimes hit you if you didn't even file. There is a big difference between paying and filing your taxes, and
This is
sometimes these
true.
people they do both. So if you fail to file your tax return, that's like 2 or 3 additional fees on top, and then there's the amount you owe, which has its own additional 2 or 3 fees, and that's just at the federal level. We're in Florida, so who cares about the states? But some of you guys live in some
Thank you, Jesus.
yeah, some of you guys live in some terrible states, that also have their own, and then they have municipalities, they have cities
Oh
that
my
want a piece
gosh.
of it. So imagine just with the IRS alone, we're talking about somewhere between, I'd say between two different charges to six different charges. Then you have the state doing it as well. Then you have the municipality doing it as well. Or you could just be a sovereign citizen, right? The sovereign citizens just,
Don't do that. Don't do that. I've seen too many videos of the sovereign citizens
you know, all
being arrested.
all you have to do is take a playbook at a Wesley Snipes, or take. There's a place called Red Pill University where you can become a sovereign.
Oh my
You can
goodness.
become a sovereign citizen, and then you can go to jail.
Oh,
Anyways,
all right.
the,
This was a great run,
yeah,
guys. Podcast end
yeah.
here. We'll talk to you. No,
Just
just
remember
kidding.
this. Those are tips from Scruffy, and now we're gonna go back to Romans. Hey, Romans, what do you think about the tax deductible business expenses as a streamer? Can you give me some examples, Romans? What do you think?
Oh, anyways, yeah. So on tax deductible business expenses, this is Scruffy, by the way. Um,
Lies, lies.
uh, lies. Yeah, tax deductible business expenses. This is actually something that I do not think streamers get enough information about, especially if you're streaming games. I know we have some people who mostly stream art or just chatting and different stuff like that. But especially if you're streaming games, those games that you're playing on stream, as long as you're playing them on stream, are technically business expenses. If you buy a skin, if you went and bought the Miku skin so that you could participate in that for a Fortnite event, and you did that on stream, if you purchased it on stream and used it on stream, that's still technically a business expense. So going back to a couple questions ago, this is where the bank having the separate bank accounts also really helps, because if you only purchase your stream stuff from that bank account, it's really easy to go through what's called your Schedule C when you file your taxes and are listing out your business expenses. You can go through and say, yep, I bought this for stream, I bought this for stream. Those are all technically business expenses. Now, where this gets a little bit tricky is you can't deduct more than you actually made. You can't make negative money from your business and then get a refund from the IRS. But this is a really great way to take advantage of some different things. Like if you're buying equipment for streaming, buying a new headphones, buying a new mic, buying a new keyboard, everything that is leading up to anything that is contributing to your stream is in business expenses. And on top of that, you can also use your internet, your office space. There's a couple different types of formulas that you can do. If you can look those up online, ask Chat GPT, something like that. Um, but you can actually use some of these expenses, even your rent, a portion of that, if you are using a portion of your living space for streaming, that can be considered a business expense and can really help reduce your income when you're streaming. Romans, looks like you're looking something up.
I was just kind of curious to see what the IRS thought these days, and thankfully it's the same. So for the IRS, for any business, this applies to everyone in the world. What is a deductible business expense? There's the two concepts of ordinary and necessary. Ordinary is if everyone in that industry does it, which isn't there like an old thing, if they jumped off the bridge, would you jump too? That
Yep.
But the good news with the IRS, the answer is that's a good answer. If everyone has to buy that French game, Expedition 33, Claire Obscura, if everyone has to pay money to play that video game, to stream it for your viewers, it is a 100% business expense. Now, this goes back to those hobbyists. Imagine you only stream once a month and you bought the
Hmm.
same game. If you only stream 10% of that game and you play 90% of it off stream, I got to tell you, I don't think that's a business expense. Like, because you played most of the content offline for your own personal
Hmm.
enjoyment. So I would tell most streamers, if you buy a game, stream it, play most of it, the majority of it, if not all of it, on stream. Unless you hate the game, then stop playing it. It's still a business expense, but it's when you start doing things off stream, it becomes a little weird. And the other part is necessary. Just because everybody else bought that game, it doesn't mean you have to buy it unless it's actually necessary for your business. So like some like this is kind of where it falls in line where people follow streamers for trends. Um, I goes in a weird place, so I guess I can't use this as an example because I would say the people are trying to help. I'm not trying to help those who are making really bad content, right? That could land you in jail for life in Korea. I'm trying to help only those who are actually doing this for the right reasons. So trying to think off the top of the dome, an example that would apply to this. I think in most cases it'll always apply. So I guess this is again Scruffy with the hot tax tip. Buy whatever game you want, play it on stream. It's a business deduction. Yeah.
All right. Again, tips from Scruffy-ish, kind of. All right. Last question we have here. How do I report my income from Twitch, YouTube, sponsorships, different things like that? So the good news is, for most of these platforms, they're pretty good about supplying you with a 1099, which is pretty easy to input into whatever tax software you're using or hand to a CPA if you're using one. For sponsorships, things start getting a little bit more complicated because most sponsors are not necessarily going to give you a 1099 for a sponsorship deal that they do. They're going to pay you, and then all right, that's the end of our transaction. So for that, it's important for you to be a little bit more specific with that. Romans may have some tips with that, but the other thing that's important to recognize is check to make sure your withholding is correct on Twitch and YouTube. Uh, a lot of times they will do some automatic withholding, but like Romans was talking about earlier, if you live in a state that has a state income tax on top of federal, they may not automatically withhold that. So that's when it's important to go into your tax settings and actually look at if you are getting everything withheld that you need to for those specific things. But I know Twitch and YouTube are both really good about supplying you with those 1099s. Sponsorships, like I said, are a little bit more complicated. Um, Romans, do you have anything to add there?
I think what I would say here is I would be surprised if they didn't 1099 you if it is
Really?
if it's over $600 and from a reputable source. Sometimes just to add you as a vendor in their system, there's a default request of a Form W-9 and it'll kick it out. You're right though. Some folks won't do it. You'll get some really interesting sponsorship deals out there. I've seen it both ways. I would hope that if it's through a reputable source that they would ask for a Form W-9 from you and that you would provide it and then someone would kick out a 1099. There are exceptions to the rule if you're paid by credit card or if you've paid through other means like crypto, those can get around the requirement. I know credit cards for sure are not required to 1099 anyone. If anyone pays you through a credit card merchant, that's a 1099K that's handled through. Credit card companies have to report everybody, so it's really on the credit card company's part to do the reporting part. I would just say to you, don't hide income. You do it by accident all the time. You might do it by accident, right? Because as a streamer, you get paid by 50 different people all the time. But I would tell you, hiding income is not the play, especially long term. Like the IRS is still using 1990s infrastructure, but eventually they'll have AI, and AI can track down activity really well. It can track this kind of activity and attribute it to you. And when it comes to the IRS, I think a lot of folks really want tips today. But the IRS isn't interested in you today. The IRS is interested in you 5 to 7 years from now. And you might be
Hmm.
saying, why are they interested in me 5 to 7 years from now? Because in 5 to 7 years, the interest, penalties, late fees, criminal time, all of that is slowly building. And they don't want to hit the pinata when it only has one candy in it. They want to hit the pinata when it has 5 to 7 years of candy in it. And when they pop it, someone gets a raise, someone looks like a hero, and you get hit with the biggest bonk on the forehead or on the head. And then all the things that can happen to you happen to you. So, uh, Yeah, it's we're never talking about today. We're talking about tomorrow and how to keep you clean today so that the tomorrow you doesn't have to think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
imagine someone today asking you, "I need all of your records for the past 5 years." Th- that is an uncomfortable, terrible, tough ask. And usually that's what the IRS does. The IRS isn't like, "Oh,
Yep.
I see you messed up 2024. Let's talk about it." They're gonna go back 3 years, and if they like what they see, they might. If they're not satisfied, they'll go further back, and they can go back 7 years, and if they find that you did it willingly or negligently, and find other reasons to pierce that 7 year statute, they can go longer. So it's just one of those things where I like to sleep good at night. So even though I'm pretty aggressive tax wise, I would never do anything that would jeopardize my sleep in the future.
Yeah.
Uh, the IRS, not a fan, but it's just not worth poking that bear in that way.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it up now is you have some time before you need to start actually filing. So this is the time to start actually planning for how you're going to tackle taxes for 2025. You want to deal that when you're still in 2025, not in January, February, March, or April of 2026. And you have to scramble to get everything done in time, and hopefully you didn't miss anything. Now is the time to start tackling that bull by the horns. It's not fun, but if you do it now, I promise you, you're going to be saving yourself some tears later on.
Amen to that. No
All right?
tears.
No tears. All right. Well, that's it for our episode today on tax planning. Romans, where can we find you? You have any new information about Reach?
What we hit 100 tickets, and we're actually
Let's
over now.
go.
Yeah, we're 20% sold. 400 left to go. A lot of the content creators that are expected to be there haven't even bought their ticket yet, so we're probably around 200 to 250 if everyone actually hit the confirm button. Uh, but we also have some fun new uh, things going on right now on Aki and Fam's stream. You can buy there's like a boomer deal.
Yeah, I saw that.
If you go, he has a partnership with Advanced GG. If you buy a ticket at Reach Conference, we will send you from his Advanced GG a the boomer pills that Advanced GG sells, which is like bone health. It's a pill for it's a daily vitamin that supports bone health and immunity, something like that. If you buy a
Mhm.
Reach ticket with I think it's code Aki, we will send you from Advanced GG the boomer pills so that you could be as healthy and strong as Boomer Aki. Catch me live in the Reach Discord. That's the only place you'll find me on the internet. You'll find me all over the place, but those are typical social media posts. If you want to
Yeah,
actually interact with me, I'm in the Reach Discord.
awesome. And that same goes for me. Probably the primary place you'll find me is also in the Reach Discord. If you have questions, feel free to join the Discord, send me a DM, post it in the gold and loot stat chat on the Reach Discord. Other than that, you'll probably see me in Marvel Rivals. I still am playing almost into gold finally. Those definitely, for those who are in the Marvel Rivals loop, those Chrono Shield tokens from the latest pass, very helpful as I'm trying to get out of Silver Hell in Marvel Rivals after switching from console to PC. But I'm almost there. Very happy to almost be done. Thank the Lord. But yeah, so this has been DLC, a finance podcast for gamers. Hope you like, comment, subscribe, drop some questions, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.